Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. And I get to be the host in this room today. And I would like to introduce Christine Barth from the Scott County Library System as our next speaker. Christine has been a regular contributor to ILOC over the years, although it's been a few years since we've heard from her. Her passion for both libraries and community history will give you some ideas for integrating local history into your library services. So I am going to go off. Take it away, Christine.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen here. It just takes a second to get the PowerPoint to cooperate with us. Okay, here we go. So again, I am Christine Barth, and I have been a librarian here at the Scott County Library System for 12 years. My first career was in journalism, and I also have an undergraduate degree in history, so I've always been interested in people's stories. My main duties at the library are cataloging, acquisitions, material selection, statistics, reference, reader's advisory, and local history projects. So as you can see, like many of you, I'm wearing many hats. I also am part-time, so the time I have to dedicate to any one thing is limited. The Scott County Library System is the oldest county library system in the state. We are located on the eastern edge of the state near the Mississippi River. From one of our branches, you can actually see the river from the library windows. We serve just under 30,000 people in the rural areas with 6 branch buildings in Eldridge, Bluegrass, Buffalo, Durant, Princeton, Walcott, and we have a traveling bookmobile. We have mostly part-time staff spread throughout the county, but we are in a library consortium with much larger systems like Davenport, Bettendorf, Clinton, and Muscatine. When I was hired, my supervisor at the time, Connie Owings, had a lot of dreams to expand the library's footprint in the community and to preserve the unique stories of rural Scott County. Since I had some experience managing a digital preservation grant at the Iowa Women's Archives in Iowa City, it seemed natural to lump this into my other duties as assigned, but never did I dream how far we'd come. In August of 2023, we published a book called Building Community Together, The History of the North Scott Community School District. The book was written by a grant-funded employee, more on that in a minute, and edited by me. We published and printed it locally in Eldridge. The print books are circulating in our library system and have gone out 38 times since August. It has also been viewed almost 100 times online, and you can access it for free on any device. The website's there on your screen. It is 136 pages with 4 appendices, and it covers 70 years of the North Scott School District history. So that's pretty exciting. Let's take a quick look inside, and then we're going to talk more about how and why we did this project. All right. Has everyone seen this come up on the screen a little bit? The book, hopefully.
Right now we're seeing your PowerPoint, Christine.
Oh, that's a problem, isn't it? Okay, hold on.
You might need to stop sharing and then share the whole desktop. Yeah, there you go. Looks good.
Here we go. So this is the inside of the book. This is what you would see online. And you can see that this page shows some student bus drivers. Yes, you heard me right. Students drove the buses from 1958 to 1965. And this sidebar right here contains an interview we did with Bob Westerhoff, who remembers unruly students and the principal having to get involved. You can also see on the other page photos of a few of the one-room schoolhouses. There were more than 100 one-room schoolhouses in Scott County at one point, and the rural areas were still using them up until the 1950s, making Scott County one of the very last to consolidate before the state of Iowa mandated that each district must have its own high school. And then it was another decade before money and political capital were raised to build graded elementary buildings. Until then, 4th grade would be in one-room schoolhouse, 1st grade would be in another, and a huge fleet of buses was crisscrossing the county, getting students where they needed to go. I'd like to read you a quick excerpt from the book, and the memories of Mary Hoffman Bender and Bonnie Miner Osterberg. And they were freshmen in September 58. Mary said, "We were so excited about a brand new school and so fortunate to be a freshman and go all 4 years to graduate. It meant a lot to us to be the starters." She remembers being nervous about using a locker for the first time and how chimes would ring at lunchtime, which signaled the time to be quiet and say a prayer. Mary was homecoming queen her senior year, and her twin brother was one of the king candidates, and she wanted him to be king. Bonnie remembers her dad being interested in watching the new high school being built. She would walk up to the construction site with her gym. Since the gym was below ground level, it became known as the pit. Bonnie lived on a farm about halfway between the new high school and Lincoln Road, right along First Street. She tells the story of that first football team having no football field at the new high school to practice on. The coaches came with Bonnie's dad to talk to Bonnie's dad about possibly using the nice flat pasture he had. Her dad was willing, so they cleaned the pasture up and mowed it all down. When it was time for practice after school, the team would run from the high school to her pasture every day to practice. Bonnie's friends liked to come over during those football practices and walk down the lane together to check out the players. They sometimes chose to watch practice from the cornfield or from the attic window of her home. When practice was over, the football players would get a drink of water from the outdoor faucet by the pig barn before running back to the high school. This is the exact time that Bonnie would choose to do her chores. She would carry her empty bucket to the chicken house like she was hunting for eggs, when in truth, there were no chickens on the farm. Mary and Bonnie both became cheerleaders for football. They didn't know much about the game of football. What cheer should we do, they wondered, at one of those early football games, all of which were played on the competitors' field. Here, do this one. R-E-B-O-U-N-D, rebound. That's how much they knew about football. And that's pretty funny now that the North Scott Community School District is considered a powerhouse in athletics and music and other activities. But it all started, the football team started in a cow pasture. So let's see if I can get back to my PowerPoint. Here it is. Okay. Without our efforts, these kinds of stories would be lost. Many individuals we interviewed between 2020 and 2023 have passed away, and their families and the community is very grateful to have known a bit about what life was once like in Scott County and the struggles and triumphs each individual faced. A big reason why we do community memory work is to know the past to find a direction for the future. I also think it brings communities closer together. When we know someone's story, we become a lot more sympathetic and understanding. We also noticed with our research that things are cyclical. Things like school budgets, student behavior issues, teaching styles. Most things aren't new, and you can see the ebb and flow of communities through a project like this. So what's unique about your community? Your community memory work will be different than ours. Every public library in the country is going to have certain authors, James Patterson, Daniel Steele, and certain services. But what makes you unique? Why is your community worth visiting? What value does your library bring to the community? Where are the holes in the narrative? One example of this is the simple timeline on page 16 of our book. It shows a timeline of professional teaching requirements, beginning with the Iowa State Normal School in 1876, and showing how 1959 was the year that 4-year degrees were required for elementary school teachers. This page took us countless hours to verify. There just wasn't a timeline of how the teaching requirements progressed anywhere that we could find. We had people who told us which schools they had gone to and what their degrees were, but we couldn't find anywhere in the state or online where the changing degree requirements for teachers was documented. As teacher retention is now a hot button issue, it seems like this would be valuable to know the changes over time and the different circumstances. We sent visitors to several archives in the state, including UNI, which has a lot of teacher training records. And we finally confirmed all the different pieces with an email to the Board of Educational Examiners. But even that office wasn't completely sure on some of the timeline, since so much of it was under local control for many decades. We went through a similar process figuring out which high schools students would have attended before North Scott opened in 1956. So projects like these are a key way the library is transforming from a warehouse full of dusty books to a creator of content and an active participant in the life of the community, remaining relevant and adding to the community story, as well as preserving it for future generations. These are all reasons why we do community memory work. So think about why you want to get started in this time of work, and we'll get to the how in a second. So we have done several projects over the years at Scott County. We have an online cemetery index, which is searchable by name, date, and military service. The North Scott Press, which is the local newspaper, and the North Scott Shield yearbooks, as well as a student fine arts publication, the Morning Star, are available online. We have a web archiving program that captures city and organizational websites, so born digital items don't get lost. And we also published a much shorter visual history of the Scott County Library System for our 70th anniversary in 2020. But our biggest project was the Scott County Community Memory Project. This was funded by a federal IMLS grant given to only 30 libraries in the whole country. We collected documents, did oral histories, and provided workshops on preserving family memories. This project was aimed at accelerating promising practices, so taking something we were already doing and amplifying it by providing training, funding, and mentorship. We opened a free scanning center where you can digitize your photographs and home movies and more at our Eldridge branch. In fact, I'm sitting in the scanning center right now doing this presentation. We conducted more than 30 oral history interviews, and we have more than 1,000 items in the digital collection ranging from the 1880s to today. So I do want to take a quick look at the digital collection here, which, okay. So this is our digital collection, and you can see we have a wide variety of items, and it's very visual and easy to use. And if we search for a flooding in Buffalo, we'll get some results. My internet's being a bit slow here for a live demonstration. Okay, so we have a scrapbook that shows pictures of the flood of 1965 in Buffalo, and you can flip through the scrapbook. And also we have some brief information, and it tells you where the physical item can be found, and it's at the Buffalo Historical Museum. It gives the address there in Buffalo, Iowa. And this is a really great example of a partnership where the Historical Museum is benefiting from so many more people being able to see this resource and know that they exist. And then we benefited because this makes our digital collection stronger and also just gives us a wider digital collection here. And then people know that the library is a place also that they can go for historical questions and to research things. And then if you scroll down a little bit here, if they load, it will show you similar items based on the metadata. And so people can really get into the collection and get there. It's not loading right now, of course, because I wanted to show it to you. Anyway, the bulk of this grant went to pay a temporary project manager to deal with the day-to-day business of making these things happen. I was the supervisor and decision maker as part of my daily library job, and we did have some volunteers conducting oral histories, scanning, and creating metadata. Out of this project that we did with the community memory, and you can see my similar items are finally loaded. We have a lot of floods on the Mississippi. Anyway, out of this project, we realized that a lot of people wanted to talk about North Scott schools, how proud they were to be Lancers, and how interesting the consolidation of the one-room schoolhouses was. So the project to research and write the history of the North Scott Community School District was born. We also knew this was something that our area historical societies and the school were not doing. They weren't writing this down and documenting it in a way for the community to see. We didn't want to duplicate any work, so if someone was already working on it, we weren't going to be involved. But in 2022, the library received a State Historic Resource and Development Grant, HRDP, to hire a temporary project manager, Nancy Youngbauer, who worked as a teacher librarian in the North Scott School District for many years. The book itself turned out to be a much bigger project than anticipated. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here quickly. We did interviews with dozens of people. We went through pages of microfilm and tracked down boxes of history, along with reading 70 years worth of newspaper coverage on local schools. As we were researching for the book, we kept having people we interviewed and talked to about the project ask us about the boxes for the school museum. Now, neither Nancy nor myself knew anything about plans for a school museum. We were very interested in finding these boxes, but no one seemed to know where they were. It took us almost 6 months to find the boxes, And then we had a treasure trove of one-room schoolhouse record books, as well as printed emails describing how the school picked the mascot, for example. The first brochures advertising North Scott as the place to be. So it was worth the effort, but very time-consuming. And then we were nearing the end of our grant and Nancy's time with us, and we still wanted to scan and describe all that stuff. This photo here shows project manager and author Nancy Youngbauer and myself in front of our very small special collections with the newly published book. So how did we get here with no budget and no staff? First of all, you have to think about what you have that's unique. We kind of already talked about that and why it's important. And then you have to think about what do you need? When I started and we had all these dreams, we really never thought we'd ever get them done. But we had this list, and then we started thinking, well, what do we need to make this stuff happen? One really small project we've done is we have backpacks you can check out, and they have a digital recorder and a digital camera and some ideas of questions to ask a family member. And so you can do your own oral history with that, and they have some genealogy books in them too. So you check out the whole backpack. So you can start with a really small step like that. You don't need to go for the biggest dream first. Is there a small project you can do to prove that your library has the commitment to handle a larger grant? Is there a partner in the community that has already done something or part of something that you can add to? What do you have already? Do you have the historical documents? Do you have the staff who are interested and really want to work on this? Do you have the expertise about digital collections? Do you have space at your library? Do you have volunteers who are looking for a project to do? Do you have a historical society who's already doing something? Our biggest needs were staff time, a person to make the calls, connections, and keep the project moving. So we kept our eye out for funding that would pay for a temporary project manager. It's a great idea to let your coworkers and your community know what you want to do. They may see something come across that fits what you want that you might have missed. There may be a local business willing to fund part of the project. Do you need someone to digitize the stuff for you? Or is your stuff already digitized and you need someone to describe and upload it? These are all great questions to ask before you start. And then I would say write the grant. You never know if you don't try. Now, our first projects that I mentioned didn't actually use grants. We just had more efficiencies in staff time and reallocation of duties, and we used some volunteers and we got those done. But as the projects got bigger, we did need some extra funding. The grant writing experience is really valuable in organizing your thoughts for the project. What do you want the final product to be? Is it a digital collection? Is it a physical space? Who will be able to access it? Have you talked to those people about what they want from the project? The IMLS grant process was very time-consuming and detailed, but at the end, I had a complete project plan. So even if we had not been one of the 30 libraries selected, we could have looked for funding elsewhere. We wound up supplementing that IMLS grant with more funding from other sources, including ALA's Libraries Transforming Communities grant. The first time I applied for that one, I was rejected. But when they opened up round 2, I had a completed grant plus feedback, so it was simple to edit it and drop it in. Some grant tips too, or make sure it's a good fit. If your project doesn't actually fit the funding requirement, skip it and wait for one that does. Answer the questions that they ask you, and then get community support. The letters of community support really kind of pushed us over the edge for some of these grants of that other people were going to support us and that they wanted this project to be done. Being flexible in community memory work is very important. So my vision of the Scott County Community Memory Project was really modeled after something I had seen Poweshiek County in Iowa do, and also the DC Memory Lab in Washington, DC. I wanted to empower people to protect their own stories. We had training, we had volunteers, we had instructions written, we had conducted scanning days. We went to a local nursing home where we got to hear people's stories, and we were literally scanning photographs off the wall, including the one you see here of the Iowa Ramblers band. And then literally the next week, COVID-19 shut the whole state, the whole world down. So gathering with elderly people was definitely a no-no, and we had to adapt our whole project. We had to pick up or receive items and scan them and give them back. But while we were at home, I created a grandparent book that allows children to interview their grandparents or grandparents to fill it out for children and include photos and memories of their growing up years. We've probably printed 400 of these. That's 400 stories now documented. We wouldn't have ever been able to contact that many people with our original plan. So it definitely wound up being better, but we definitely had to be flexible. And I am including the grandparent book as a handout when those handouts get posted. So feel free to use that in your own communities or adapt it for your own use. Then you have to think about how will you sustain the project after the grant. We are continuing to add to our memory project and to the history of the schools with existing staff and volunteers, but we don't have any grant funding at the moment. Nancy, thankfully, is still volunteering, and we have a local special needs student scanning those boxes of items that we got from the school district. We are limited in our capacity to do oral histories, but we can accommodate a few, and we continue sharing new items on our social media pages so that these projects don't fall off people's radar. And then we have been visiting community groups and school kids to talk about the book and the history of our area. Another thing I would recommend is documenting as you go. Take photos of your work, write down your successes, write down what you would do differently next time. This makes the reporting process for the grant go easier, but it also helps you get the next grant because you have all this documentation that you already completed a successful project and you have ideas of what you could do better next time. You will always wish you asked for more and try to anticipate this. So as Nancy got into the research on the book, we realized that the vision of the project was really changing. We had a timeline in Google Docs where she was putting key events, people, and some anecdotes from her interviews. And once she started writing, she realized the book was going to be about 4 times longer than we had originally anticipated. So we considered only covering the beginning of the school district and the consolidation process, but there was so much important professionalization and expansion that happened after. Plus, I said I didn't want to do this again. I really wanted to do it right the first time. I wanted it to be as definitive as it could be. So we could have used some more funding for Nancy's salary and more for the printing of the book since it was so much longer than originally planned. However, Nancy generously donated her time, and my boss and supervisor carved out more time for me to spend on editing and confirming details. Our friends group, without being asked, took it upon themselves to find funding for more copies of the book because they thought it was such an important project, and they plan to get even more printed for the elementary schools to have as a reference. It all worked out, but one thing I wish we would have asked for was money for professional editing software. Publishing a book from Google Docs is not recommended. That's what we did, and it looks great, but I have many gray hairs from the process. So try to anticipate every need. Another thing is when we got the Scott County Community Memory Project grant, I tried to think of everything. We had all this equipment, so much cool equipment for digitizing everything that you could imagine. But I wasn't thinking about what we would do when the equipment was not being used at one of our branches or at a nursing home or somewhere else. And we didn't really have anywhere to put it. So stacking the boxes on my desk was not very realistic. So I wish I would have asked for money for a cart that would have stored all that equipment. But we wound up finding one in the bowels of the library and putting everything on it. But that's one thing that I have learned. All right. And then you always have to think about what's next. You always want to have a wish list of projects in case funding or volunteers fall from the sky. That doesn't just apply to community memory either. I think it applies to everything, your whole library, but definitely for community memory. What if someone in the community asks you what your next big project is or what your dream project is? You should have that list. And honestly, this book was the second to last thing on our wish list. So this is kind of almost the dream project. We do have some work to do to continue to document the school yearbooks and the local newspaper. And we would love to partner with someone to get current photos of rural communities and dig into the history of local businesses, restaurants, churches, and kind of have like a visual history that way. It seems like an impossible goal to find that perfect person to partner with us on this. but so did this project 10 years ago. So you never know if you don't have the list. All right. Something strange is going on with my bullets here, but we're going to talk about lessons learned. And I think this is advice to any size library, is start somewhere. You don't need to pick the biggest or most impressive project to start. Perhaps there's something half done, finish that. Perhaps you don't even know where to start. Do an inventory, figure out what you have, and that's your first project. Then come up with some plans for how to preserve and provide access to it. Break projects into smaller chunks. We worked our way up to a bigger project like the Scott County Community Memory. And then off of that, we kind of just kept doing these little projects that were related. We talked with all the cities in our area about how they're preserving history and who's keeping the photographs that people take at events. Then we started talking to people about the schools and getting their memories, and kind of in preparation for the book before we even wrote that grant. And we used a lot of research we'd already done to make that project happen. One thing that we are often told when we start one of our projects is, oh, I've only lived here 50 years, or my life's not that interesting. And every time, those people were very interesting to talk to. They had interesting photos in their houses, or they knew someone else who had something that we were interested in. For example, we got some really great photos and memories of a national corn husking competition that was hosted in Scott County. Now, my generation sometimes shucked corn, but not as a sport. However, many young people from the 1940s to the 1970s and even earlier participated in this like it was a sport. It was a big competition. And so this was very interesting to us, even though the people who had the items thought it was kind of just normal corn husking happened. But this was a really big competition with huge crowds that came from all over the country to watch it. It was very interesting to us. So this is the most time-consuming part of community memory work, is the connections with people. But it's also the most valuable, teaching people to tell their own story and pass it on to the next generation. All right. So that's community memories about conversation and storytelling. And then access matters as well. If you have a lot of historical items and no one knows you have them, doesn't matter. If no one can get to them because of your hours of operation, where they're stored, doesn't matter. This is why we spent so much time digitizing at our libraries. And remember the boxes in storage at the school district? Now everyone has access to the items in there, or will shortly. We're still uploading all that stuff and still actively scanning it. There were a lot of boxes. Even if they never create a museum, that history has been saved and people are learning from it. And I would say that anyone can do it. You don't need a master's degree or specialized archives training. I have both of those things, but I also asked a lot of questions of people already doing the work. I read a lot of documentation online, and we learned a lot as we went. We did make a lot of mistakes. It's important to plan, but you can also pivot. And then lastly, I think libraries should be involved with this type of work. We already talked a little bit about transforming from a warehouse to a player in the community. I think it fosters goodwill in the community. People like that you're interested in their stories. It gets people involved with the library in a different way, not just as consumers, but as creators. And we libraries also have many of the resources to make these types of projects successful. We have technology, we have people skills, we have community connections. Sometimes we have space, and often we have historical materials already. So we're already started in this work, and we should continue. So this is my contact information. Feel free to contact me. Email is the best way to get a hold of me. I'm not really at my desk that often, and I am part-time. And then all of our projects can be found at our website, which is listed there at the bottom. So if you want to look at them more, please visit our website to see all those projects. And then I gave Sam a whole bunch of handouts because we have already done a lot of this documentation and training work. So I want you guys to benefit from that. So once those handouts are available, I provided copyright and digitization forms, oral history guidelines, the grandparent book that I reference, and then I made a series of bookmarks for the public about how to get started doing your own preservation work, how to take care of historical photos, copyright basics, things like that. Those were things that the cities that we talked to found very valuable for people who haven't had any training or experience, just to know kind of where to start and how to begin. So that is my presentation, but I'm happy to take some questions.
All right, thanks, Christine. This is Becky. I'm going to leave the PowerPoint up for just a second yet in case anybody wants to write down any of the information. Otherwise, we can stop sharing then so they can see your face as you answer our questions for us. We only had a couple come through, and I have to admit, I've been trying to multitask, so you may have addressed this. If you did, just
okay.
tell me that you already talked about that and everybody else knows what you said. But my question had to do with the platform that you use on your website for all your digitized stuff. What are you guys using and how hard was that to do?
We use archive.org for most of our digital collections. The reason I chose it was because it is very easy to use. You can create multiple accounts. So like you can have a volunteer account where they can log in and upload. And then you can kind of you can create your own metadata for it. They have certain metadata that's kind of already laid out for you. And then it's very easy to access. It will show up in a Google search after a couple of weeks once Google finds that. I like that. And I just really like the way the books. So we started with the yearbooks kind of for the digitization. And I think I saw that, I think Des Moines used that same site, and I saw the way theirs looked and I really liked it. So we just were like, yeah, we're going to do that too. Internet Archive is free to use. I just saw the question about costs. So it does not cost anything to create an account. You do have to have 50 items to create a collection. So like that collection page that I showed you that had all the search and all of that, you do have to have 50 items. So there are some items that we don't have a collection for. The Fine Arts Morningstar publications are one that we just kind of upload one at a time. But once you get 50 items, you just email the Internet Archive and they create the collection for you. You can brand it with your logo and the description and all of that. You don't have a lot of control. Like they recently changed the way they count their statistics, and I don't like it. I don't feel that our information is being counted very accurately, but we don't have control over that. So that would be a downside as opposed to, building something yourself or using Omeka or some of the other programs, or even the state of Iowa has a site which is really good too, that you can upload stuff. Yes, Iowa Heritage. Thank you for that.
I had that one loaded up and ready to go.
And one of the reasons we didn't go with Iowa Heritage at the time was it wasn't as advanced. And also we had a lot of multimedia stuff I wanted to include. And so Internet Archive was a great solution for that, to have videos and photographs and pamphlets and scrapbooks all in the same collection. It was kind of hard to find somewhere that could accommodate that. So yeah, it's free, and you just create an account, and they have lots of guides on getting started and creating metadata and all that. So
Susan, does that answer your question as well? You had kind of the same one, getting ready to set everything up on Internet Archive. So it sounds like she's maybe kind of addressed that. I'm put in a plug what you saw me put in here. It sounds like Internet Archive it's free and it seems fairly easy to use. So I definitely would suggest people look into that. But I would also encourage some of you, especially in smaller libraries, if you don't want to have to deal with maintaining it yourself and keeping it on your website, and maybe you don't have very good broadband, and so it's difficult. The state library has this, it's at iowaheritage.org, but it's the Iowa Heritage Digital Collection. And it's a place where once you've digitized your information, you do some metadata with it, and then you can upload it, and it's available on the state library webpage on that Iowa Heritage Digital site. And so that's another way that that folks can do that if they're interested. And we've got a staff member right now who works a lot with that. We also, I'm going to put in one more plug, we also have some really nice digital scanners that we are loaning out along with a whole bunch of other things. And so Tom can come to the library and help you guys get started with that, but talk to him if you're interested on that. Yes, Mara. Tom Kaiser is a wealth of information. I would agree with that. I always send all the questions to him.
And I think, like I said, when we started doing the yearbooks, which was about 10 years ago, Iowa Heritage was in its infancy, I'll say, and it did not have some of the features we wanted. I think now it does, but I'm not moving our stuff.
No,
it's basically
no. What I said. And
it works. I've talked to Tom and things like that. So so we just kept using Internet Archive, but
yeah, if it works for you.
Absolutely. Anything that gets it into the hands of patrons is good in my book. And I saw Susan, you're welcome anytime to come visit Eldridge. And the scanning center is not just for our patrons. If you want to travel, you can come use it for free. There's not a lot really accessible. A lot of times you have to send your items out and people are uncomfortable with that if you pay for a service. And so if you're willing to put in a little bit of time, I used our scanning center to scan the diary that my grandma kept in World War II. And then I gave the flash drives as Christmas gifts. So that was really special for our family.
That's really cool. Do you have a lot of patron use then of that?
It goes in waves. I would say that we've had people use it in unexpected ways as well. Someone came in and wanted to use a digital recorder to he had a long time ago published a book of poetry and his brother wanted to read it, but was blind. And so he recorded himself reading some poetry, which was not a use that we would anticipate, but of course we supported that. I think he got fed up with how long it was taking actually. So I'm not sure he read the whole book, but it was a cool idea. And I thought it was a neat way to use the room. So we have our volunteers use it quite a bit to we're still scanning the school district. A lot of those record books and the old one-room schoolhouse where logs of everyone's attendance and grades and things, we're still scanning those.
So I want to invite anybody again, post anything that you've got for Christine in the chat. Otherwise, I've got another question that's sort of a side tangent on this. One of the things that holds a lot of people back when I talk to them about it, whether it's IHDC or doing their own, is that whole idea of cataloging or putting the data in there. Can you talk a little bit about that process and how it's easier than cataloging is what I keep telling people. It's really not that hard with this stuff, but it seems very intimidating.
I am a cataloger, so I guess it came easily to me. But no, really, I set it up because I did have volunteers doing that a lot. And so I wanted it to be very easy. So I did set up, I just used an Excel spreadsheet. And so I had every field that to us was required. And so that's something you have to do when you're planning is think about what descriptions you want to use. Do you want subject headings or do you not really care that much? What is the title? Because most of these things don't have titles. They don't come with them. What do you do with that? Is it really specific or is it more general? How specific do you want to be? And then for some things, like we did want subject headings, and it was important to us that the locations, because we serve 16 different towns in the rural area, and that we wanted Scott County always to look the same so that when you clicked on that, you were getting all the stuff. So I just created drop-down menus in the Excel spreadsheets so the volunteers didn't have to remember any of that.
That's a great idea.
So that, and then there were drop-down menus for like the rights statements were always the same. Our contact information is always the same. So all of that just got copied over. So it was really like the title and the description of the item that people were doing. And then a little bit with like the names of people in the photos, if we knew them, and like how those were structured. So, I did develop some things like that. So it was a lot of deciding. There's a lot of libraries who have a lot of metadata out there. It just depends on how specific you want to get. You could maybe do without some of the things that we had. But even our rights statements, they're actually just literally links to rights statements that the Digital Public Library of America does. So I didn't recreate the wheel, I just used them.
That's a good idea too.
So And then I think I saw a question about historical societies don't want to share their stuff. Yeah, that's a hard one.
Question.
We have run into that because there is a historical society in one of our towns who likes to make these little books, and they're fabulous books of a topic, and they put all these pictures in them, and then they sell them. And that's their main revenue stream. And so they thought if the pictures were on the library site that they wouldn't sell them. Even though I actually think they would have sold a lot more because they would have reached this huge patron base that we have and this huge social media reach that we have. And the people that we interact with for reference, they're going to buy their own copy if they really want it. And we've found that with the book too. Actually, we cannot sell them because we got state funding to do that, and so we don't sell them. But we have so many people wanting them, so they're accessing it online and probably printing their own is what's happening. So I know that there's a demand for that, and I think it's just again, it's that sort of people skills legwork, trying to convince people that you're actually going to reach more people if you share it. It's a lot like the publishers and the ebooks argument, actually. Except the historical society side of it. So we had a former staff member who was involved with that particular historical society, and she went to bat for us as well. And honestly, their community is not as represented in the digital collection because they never came around. But we had a lot of places who were very excited about it because they saw the potential to reach new customers and just to have the story told in a different way too, as opposed to, the place that's only open 20 hours a week. Well, now it's 24/7 access.
And from everywhere.
Right.
You've got families that have come from Europe, and you've got extended families who would like to see those family histories, or, the one-room school. There's just so much, like you said, better access when
right. And I think it shines a spotlight on the community too. We had a lady come in and she was covered in mud. This is just a crazy story. I couldn't make this stuff up. And she was like, I can't find the grave. You're like, what's going on here? She was from, I believe it was New York, so really far and probably visiting family. And she was looking for a gravestone, and we were able to use our cemetery stuff that had been digitized to get her kind of a map, essentially, of where the headstone was. And she never came back, so I'm going to assume that she found the grave. But
that was one of your projects as well. I'm thinking you maybe did a presentation on that I saw.
Yeah, that was actually our first one, where I thought it was going to be the easy one, and it was actually really complicated. So don't start with your cemetery records. I'll say that. No, so that was one of our first projects, yes. All
right, anybody else have questions? Let's see. What I particularly liked about this, lots of information that Christine shared with you all, but so many good tips. Like she said, you don't have to recreate the wheel. There are people out there who have made the mistakes already, and they'll tell you what to avoid and ways to do it. And so listening to this, I think, is really helpful to know this worked really well. This is how we got this piece to work. So I really appreciate that about this. Yeah, Renee, I'm interested in that grandparent book as well. I heard that.
I think it's really great, and we've had just a great response with it. So feel free to use it. Like I said, I made it while we were home during the pandemic. When people couldn't access the library, and then we've just given a lot of them away. And it does have our library info at the back. You can just cut that out and put your own in, or whatever you need. Contact me and I'll get you a more editable one, or use it as it is. I don't care. But I think
nice to give you credit.
I think it's really cool too to get the next generation excited about learning about what life was like, in the olden days, and just just how people lived, and a lot of things are the same and some things are different. And I think that's a really cool conversation to start with families. So it's pretty exciting for us to be part of that. And the backpacks, I saw someone mention in chat, I stole that from another library. They were also part of the the IMLS grant. We had a cohort of those 30 libraries, which was really cool. So we were stealing ideas from each other. But it was a historical society in Vermont that made it. So I just kind of took that and we made it our own. We made it a little different for here. But our children's librarian actually was just doing a program. The kids were making time capsules and she was showing them the Scott County Community Memory Project, like right before I came in here. So it's a wide variety of people, and the kids were excited and they were like looking for their parents to see if they were in there, and looking up their towns to see the pictures that may be in there. So I think it's really neat to get a lot of different people involved in telling stories and sharing.
Today has kind of been about telling stories, and in
Yeah,
almost every
yeah.
session that I've been in today, telling the story, whether it's your personal story, your community story, or your library story.
Well, and I think a lot of the stuff that Jay said in the first one was like, oh yeah, we kind of learned that the hard way. So hopefully you don't have to do that. Hopefully you have successes the first time. But
well, for those of you for whom this is your last session, I have put the link to the CE form in the chat so you can get access to that one. Amanda just did too. That's funny. And Amanda, I stole your format there of putting CE form. Last time I just threw the link up and I thought, probably should tell people what that is. So if you are finished for the day, go ahead and fill this out. Like I said, I think if you're looking for the video recordings or all of the handouts that Christine is going to have, they will be in Iowa Learns, but give us a little bit of time for that, probably a week or so before that all gets up in there. I believe if you're going to watch some of the sessions, since we had 2 back-to-back or at the same time, if you're going to watch one of those later in Iowa Learns, you'll be able to set it up and do it that way. So for now, do it this way, one form for everything that you attended today. Anybody else have questions? Otherwise, I will let Amanda kind of do any last minute housekeeping. No.
Just great information. As always, Christine. It's fun. It's very informative. I loved it.
Well, thanks for coming, everyone, and good luck on your projects.
Yeah, lots of good stuff. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.